All right, we're going to get started. Thank you guys for coming. I know this is a really busy time of the year, both professionally and personally for you. So I just want to start by saying how truly grateful and humbled I am that you made 70 minutes to talk about a book that I've been working on for a couple of years. And I'm hoping that we can use the collective wisdom in today's group to help me kind of polish and finalize the book. And full transparency, I tried to have it out the end of this year, and I've just been so super busy, as I'm sure a lot of you have. So the plan is to get it out Q2 of 2025. For those of you who may not know me, my name is Michael Krumpak. I've been in learning and development for a heck of a long time. I started when I was 18, and there's some people on today's call, Dave and Ben, that we used to work with at InfoCision back in 1990 in Akron, Ohio, and they might have even taken one of these pictures here. But I started working in telemarketing doing sales, and I would help people sell the Ron Popeil pasta maker and fitness products and Oriental Pearl Cream and all this crazy stuff. And they basically said, "Hey, Krumpak, why don't you go like train everybody on how you do this?" Because I was like 18 at the time. I was making like 25 bucks an hour. It was like life was really good back then. So I ended up going to grad school, and I worked at the Mass Transit Administration while I worked on my master's in industrial organizational psychology in Baltimore. And I would design selection tests for bus drivers, for the repair technicians, for the light rail, and for diesel mechanics. And so fast forward to today, I worked in corporate America for almost 30 years or so. And then I started my own business about 5 years ago. And one of my passion projects was to write this book. And some of you I probably reached out to and got a sense of some feedback and guidance that you have. So the book is called Why Smart Leaders Do Stupid Things, Lessons Learned from Lousy Leaders. And I originally had Why Smart Leaders Do Shitty Things, but I got some feedback that might be a little bit too direct and abrupt. So I want to get your feedback on all of that. So the way that we're going to communicate, we have over 70 people registered, so we'll probably get like maybe 30 or so. Looks like we have 26 already. But in the chat pod, if you could just enlighten me and let me know. Hold on, can you guys see me okay? Okay, all right, good. I wanted to just get a sense of like where you're calling in from. So in the chat pod, just city and state. It'd be good just to kind of get a sense of like who's on today's call, or roundtable as we call it. So as you do that, so my focus has been on talent development over COVID. I've been coaching for years, but I got my PCC certification, and I started doing primarily coaching, and then things kind of led to another. And I kind of shifted my business to focus more on talent development. But these are some of the awards and certifications that I have. I have about 30 people on my team that we work with, a lot of different projects and everything. And so this isn't a sales pitch, but just to give you a little bit of a background. And these are some of the privileged experiences that we've had. I've worked at American Airlines. I ran learning at the House of Representatives. I've coached a number of clients all across the globe. I've worked with a lot of people. Many of you are on today's call, so I really appreciate that. And so hopefully this is an opportunity where you can learn a little bit today. You can also give some feedback. So I'm going to give you kind of a timeline of like how we got here for today. So I had this idea in 2022 to put together a book. And I was talking to a buddy in my coaching program, and we're like, you know what? You should do a list of all like the bad people that you've worked with and like what you've learned from them. And I had this like very exhaustive list. And he's like, you know what? You should do like a coffee table book or like a reference guide. And so long story short, it has evolved from a coffee table book to I had about 30,000 words, which is way, way, way too much. So I locked myself in Mexico back in October, and I kind of repackaged the book. And part of today, I want to tell you about how I repackaged it, give you a framework that I'm using, and I also want to give you some case studies and just see if the framework works. So I'm going to like put you to work a little bit today to kind of test this framework that we call the Legendary Leader Framework. So back in last year, I started a writing group, which is great. And I was supposed to turn in my manuscript the end of November. November 15th, I had an idea of like repackaging the book with this new leadership framework. So I just submitted the book. I won a nice little award for it, which was great. And then I'm like, you know what? I need to take like all these words. It's probably like a 15-hour book read. And I want to try to get it to like 3 hours. So my goal is if you were strolling through the airport, you had a little bit of time, went in the bookstore, you would see a book, you could grab it, you could hop on like a 3-hour flight and sort of read it and complete it. So that takes us to today, where I'm gathering your feedback and recommendations, and then I'm going to kind of finalize this and publish it next year. So the format for today, everybody is on mute because we have a lot of people. If you'd like to say anything, just raise your hand. If you have any comments that you want to add, go ahead and do so. I'm looking at the chat pod here. We have people all over the place. Akron, Miami, Chicagoland, Chevy Chase, welcome Cheryl, West Palm Beach, Houston, Albuquerque, Pennsylvania, Dublin, San Antonio. Yeah, we usually have a lot of people like outside the country too, so maybe they'll join us, or maybe they're here already. I don't know. But so the roadmap for today, I want to get your input to help shape the final book. I want to talk about this concept, which is lousy leadership, where it came from, and how we can learn about it. And basically, throughout my career as a consultant and a coach and working in talent management in corporate America, I've seen so much stuff. I'm sure all of you have too, like stories and things that like, I cannot believe that someone did this. Like, I won't tell you the company, but once I saw a VP jump on top of the conference table, storm across it, and then point his finger and yell at someone. And surprisingly enough, results went up for a couple months and then everyone quit. So there's all these examples of like toxic leadership, or I call it lousy leadership, that I think can really shape us as leaders and can really help us develop and learn. So, and then also, I'm going to give you a chance for those of you that stick around to the end to win a preview copy of the book. So you'll get a copy before it is released to everybody, and I will scribble my autograph on it too, if you would like that. So the ground rules for today: confidentiality, candor, collaboration. Hopefully you can stay on cam. Hopefully you can complete in some of the polls and the exercises that we have. And like I said, the main format is the chat pod. So as you have comments, as you have reactions, I'm going to save that transcript. We're recording this. I'll give you a copy of the recording if you want to, go back and, I don't know, have some popcorn and some giggles and fun. Or maybe you want to share it with someone. And then also I'll give you a job aid, which kind of summarizes everything that we talk about from a content perspective. So you have kind of like a cheat sheet to move forward. And then a couple times I have this QR code. If you're interested in learning a little bit more, you'd like to be on a list to let you receive some updates on what's going on with the book, you can certainly do that. So the framework is pretty basic. You're either a lousy leader or a legendary leader. I think we all know what good leaders kind of go to the dark side if you'll humor of leadership looks like. And why is leadership development, and particularly lousy leadership? I was a professor at Catholic University. I taught ethical leadership. I taught foundations of leadership, change management. And there were all these examples of like really good things that leaders do and competency models. And that's really good. But like sometimes I learn a lot more by just looking at what the lousy leaders around us do. So I have some examples of, I don't know if you consider them legendary or lousy, but we'll look at like Elon Musk. We'll also look at Elizabeth Holmes from Theranos. Maybe if we have time, look at Ellen DeGeneres. So I have some like practical kind of pop examples that I want to just kind of test this model and get your feedback on. And then a lot of the individual personal stories, which I'm not calling out anyone by name. None of you on this call are like in the book. So just to kind of like leverage expectations there. But I really think there's so many missed opportunities to grow better leadership. And I know some of you have shared some examples in your organization about leaders that have kind of gone to the dark side, how it's impacted attrition, how it's impacted psychological safety, how engagement has gone down. So it's like we want to learn from all those lessons so that we can become stronger leaders by learning from the lousy leaders. So what happens when people become lousy? Well, these are like three kind of buckets that really elevate all of the content. So they basically want to be right over doing the right thing. They have low self-awareness and blind spots. And you know, my theory is no one gets out of bed in the morning and says, "Hey, today I'm going to be a lousy leader." But it's little things like you get a bump in power, you get a bump in your title, your compensation goes up, you get a big raise, you have a lot more control and autonomy. And sometimes if we don't check ourselves, it can lead us to the dark side, which is that lousy leadership. And then some of these people make more, and I see this every day, especially like many of our coaches on our team, that people address and they run into these fire drills and crises that are going on rather than like lifting their head up and thinking a little bit more strategically. So I'm going to give you a poll here in a second, but just a couple other slides. What makes us lousy? It's the pressure. It's the stress. It's the lack of transparency. It's the punishing dissent where you yell, you scream at people. Maybe you don't intend to do that, but some of us get very emotional and that kind of comes out. And as a result, people like shut down and disengage. So these are just some of the things that really can lead to lousy leadership. So I want this book when it's done to have like a long shelf life. So I don't want to give like too many examples of current things. And so I was walking by my Alexa. I have the Alexa show and there's like, you know, videos and ads and all that kind of stuff that pop up. And I saw this yesterday from the Today Show. And it was the editor in chief of LinkedIn. And he was talking about like what's going to go on in the workplace in 2025 and beyond. And the big thing is a lot of these people that are retired are going to become unretired. So they're going to go back to the workplace. And it's really interesting because right now, many workplaces have up to 5 different generations. They all have different values. They all have different work styles. And so a lot of these baby boomers, if you will, are going to go back into the workplace. And what we're going to see, according to LinkedIn, is that about 24% increase in the number of baby boomers that go back to the organization. And organizations are going to now offer internships to these people. So the thought is they're not looking at experience, they're not looking at education, but they're trying to like find talent and harvest it in a way that can contribute to the bottom line. So I thought that was like really interesting. The other thing is that AI is going to explode. Just kind of a show of hands. How many of you have used AI in the last 90 days to try to tighten something up or figure out? Yeah, awesome. So there's a lot of things that are going on with AI, and AI in 2025 is really going to explode. They're finding that work processes that took 500 hours or so can now be done in 2. And as a leader, it's like, how do you leverage those tools, but still make sure that employees are engaged and focused, and you have that interpersonal presence that should still come out. Another part of AI is it's going to allow the workplace to be more inclusive. So people that might have a hard time writing, people that might have not the critical thinking skills that we need, it's going to give people a tool to kind of help them. So AI is going to be a big thing. And then finally, the last thing is organizations, and this is a little sensitive maybe to some people, but they're diving into some of these topics that really haven't been explored. And the example that they used at the Today Show was topics about menopause and how it can impact the productivity, and how women need like better support, better insurance, better like understanding and adaptability. So that's just to say, I think as leaders, it's really important to look strategically about what's going on in the workplace so that we can actually dial up and redo the way that we approach leadership. And I always say, like, what got you here is not going to get you to the next level. So it's really important to be mindful and stay current on some of these workplace trends. So I want to ask you for your participation in the first poll, which is like, what's your level? Are you a business owner? Are you a leader of others, like a manager, senior manager? Are you a leader of leaders, which is more that executive level? Do you support leadership? Maybe you work in HR, talent management, or are you an individual contributor? And sort of my view is that everybody is a leader. So we're going to open up the poll, and I just want to say thank you to Shane, who's helping me launch some of these polls. And if you guys have any questions or any technical glitches, L4 Learning Solutions support, L4LS support is one of the chat items. So just go ahead and send Shane a message. But all right, I'm going to give you about 8 seconds more to complete your job level. I just want to get a sense of like who the population is for today. Okay, 3 seconds. Okay, let's end the poll and let's share the result. Interesting. So I'm going to actually take a picture of this so that I can come back to this later. So just bear with me 1 second while I unlock my phone. Okay. All right. So majority of you are business owners or entrepreneurs. Looks like many of you, 32%, are a leader of leaders. So great. I really, really am happy and thankful that you're here, because a lot of this is not only how you help yourself as a leader, but as a director, as an executive, how do you role model and how do you share some of these legendary behaviors with your team? Some of you support talent management, 5%, and 14% are individual contributors. Okay, awesome. So it's good that many of you are like senior, or you're owning your own business, or you're an entrepreneur. So awesome, great. Thank you for that. So let's travel together to the dark side. And I would like to hear, before I start, opening up the kimono and telling you like how we're defining what this lousy leadership construct is in the model, I want to ask you, what are some examples of some of the worst leaders that you worked for? So I think I gave you one example of the VP that jumped on the table and was screaming at people. This is always kind of a fun exercise, but I just want to kind of get a sense of what are some examples. I'm not looking for names, I'm not looking for companies, but examples of some of the worst leaders that you've worked with. So you can just direct that into the chat. And just so you know, I have 2 monitors, so that's why I'm like looking at 2 different things. So yeah, just to mix up a little bit. Lying or hiding the ball, always having a self-serving agenda. Thank you, Steph. Oh, my connection is breaking up. Can you guys hear me okay now? Okay. Sorry about that. I rebooted my router. So hopefully it'll kick up a little bit. Let's see. DeWitt, welcome. Having a tirade in the middle of a meeting. Yeah, I've seen so many people just go off and create this environment of fear. And like sometimes it works for a little bit, but over time it really, really can lead to a lot of unhappy people, unproductive people, and ultimately people that exit the organization. Okay. And some of you guys are liking up some of these micromanaging, the CEO calling operation managers an effing idiot in front of many people. That's horrible. Berating, belittling, Narcissist. Yeah, narcissist really comes up. I mean, we're not like diagnosing people, but there are some behaviors that one could say that, oh yeah, this person is a total narcissist. Um, Felicia coming to our HR strategy completely hungover. Oh my gosh, wearing the same clothes as the day before. Wow, it's like prom. Ellen found out that her entire team was being relocated to another state because a leader. Oh my gosh. Large organization announced a huge project but not spoken to them. Yeah, yeah. I don't know if you've ever seen Succession. I swear it's one of my like favorite shows on HBO. But there's an example where they come in, they tell the employees, hey, your job is safe, we're merging, we're changing directions, we need everyone committed. And then as soon as everyone like signs the paperwork and gets back to work, they fire everyone. So like there's ways that you can do this stuff, and these are all these horrible toxic examples that really can lead to taking people to the dark side of leadership. So thank you guys for enlightening me and sharing some of these stories, and hopefully you can and the invitation is open too. If you have anything that you want to share kind of offline, I'm happy to have a confidential conversation, and maybe we can tighten up the book with some of your examples. So I did a LinkedIn post a couple of weeks ago. I'm like, how many of you would board an airplane if you knew only 82% of pilots were like qualified to fly the plane? And like, I know that's extreme, but if you think of it, according to a recent poll from Gallup, 82% of employees state that their boss lacks basic leadership skills. So there's so much of an opportunity to really boost our own individual leadership skills. We all have blind spots. We all think we're so much better than we actually are. And there's a lot of things that we can do to discover and uncover what some of our leadership gaps are. One of the things that we launched earlier this year was a 360 degree feedback. So there's tons of great 360 instruments out there that can give you confidential, anonymous feedback from your direct reports, from your peers. It's a great, great exercise. It doesn't take a lot of time or a lot of money that can really share some light on that. So let me tell you about the Stanford prison experiment. Have any of you heard of this? Those of you that have maybe studied psychology. Yeah, yeah. So this is crazy. This happened in 1971. And thank you, Tammy. I saw your hand go up. They did an experiment at Stanford University in the basement. And they told everyone it's an experiment. They asked who wants to play the prison guards and who wants to play the prisoners. And very quickly, the prison guards started to become authoritative, authoritarian, abusive, sadistic. The criminals or the people that were playing the role of the prisoners, they were anxious. Some of them stopped eating. One person had to go to the hospital. And it's so crazy. And there's still tons of research that, Google it, look on YouTube. There's like a great documentary about it. But if power is left unmonitored and uncontrolled, it can really lead to some of these toxic behaviors. So I think that's really important just to kind of look at how even in an artificial setting, when people are given power and authority and not checked, some really bad things can happen. So that's kind of the setup. I just wanted to let you know a little bit of like some of the backstory. All this is like going to be in the book. But now what I'd like to do is invite you to share some feedback on the book structure. And let me tell you kind of, and I know you haven't like heard a lot, but I want to introduce this now and then we'll come back to it later. But the previous version of the book, it had lots of stories, it had lots of examples. I gave it to a few people to look and they're like, I don't know how this fits in. It's hard to read. What am I supposed to do with all this? So after the manuscript was submitted, I came up with this version of the legendary leadership framework. And basically what we're doing in the book is there's an introduction, kind of similar to like what I did, the overview here. We talk about the business case for leadership, and we look at some recent examples of how really good leadership skills and what are those prioritized leadership skills that if you address can really have a good impact. And then we go into some case studies, some application And then at the end of the book, it's reflection and planning. And it's all designed around this leadership framework. So this is part of the introduction of the book, and I'll just read it to you. So in this book, I'm going to take you through the key elements of legendary leadership. It's a model that we've developed from decades of research, leadership experiences, coaching, and just real world situations. We're going to dive into 9 competencies that I'm going to ask your feedback that hopefully, if you can nail them, will really have a lot of transformational power for you, the people that you lead, and your organizations. And the competencies are liberation, empathy, growth, having clear expectations, being able to like reach agreements with people through negotiation, be able to make quick decisions that are based on like values and impact and ROI, be able to be adaptive, be resilient. So when something doesn't go your way or you don't want, if someone doesn't approve your plan, you can at least get behind it because you know it's best for the organization. And then yielding. How do you give people autonomy and sort of back out? So these are the building blocks of leadership that really, if you do it well, it's going to drive innovation, build trust, and unlock a lot of potential in your organization. So let me give you the framework, and then I'm going to ask you to kind of prioritize what you think are the most important pieces of this. So this spells legendary. These are some examples, and I won't like bore you too much with reading through all the examples, but liberation is all about creativity. Empathy is pretty self-explanatory. Growth is like helping people learn, develop, stretch assignments. Being clear with your expectation, negotiation, decision making, adaptability, resiliency, and then yielding. So what I'd like to do, and Shane, I'm going to ask that you launch the next poll. And let me just explain, this poll looks a little bit different than the other ones. So there's kind of 5 categories that you're going to see from like most important to least important. And what I would like you to do is like think of like leadership fails. So basically the opposite of this legendary leadership model. So when people fail to be liberated, what does that do? Well, it stifles creativity, it decreases the dialogue, it decreases risk taking. So you should be able to rank these, and you can put them in like very important. There's like 1 or 2 things, important, neutral. But basically, what I want you to do is take the examples here of the legendary leadership framework and drag them into like what you think is the most important thing that leaders need to work on, that if they nail, will raise the bar, will raise the needle, and really help us. So are you guys able to complete the poll okay? A little thumbs up? Yes. Okay, cool. Thank you, thank you, thank you. All right, I know this takes a little bit more time than the other one, so I'll give you like 30 seconds. And then I think you have to submit your vote. So yeah, this is the most work you're gonna have to do, I promise. All right, 5, 6 people, 7 people submitted. Do me a favor. Once you submit, can you just put your hand up so I know that you've submitted? Oh, and I should say you can use the hand raise, and then you can lower it too. That's probably an easier way to kind of keep them all up there. Okay, a few more people. 11 people. All right, we're at 55%. Let's get it to like 70-ish. 64. Excellent. Thank you, Roxanne, Marie, Ellen, Tammy, Vanessa, Nicole, Brady, Frederick, Okay, we're at 77. I'm going to give you 3 more seconds to hit submit. And then I'm going to end the poll. Okay, and you can put your hands down if you would like. All right, let's share results. Okay, interesting. So liberation, 100% of you answered that that's in your top. So liberation, so people that stifle creativity, dialogue, risk taking. Empathy is number 2. I'm gonna give you what like the research says here in just a minute, but I wanted to just kind of see from the audience what you see. So empathy is another big one. Growth, expectations, negotiation, decision making, adaptability, resilience. I don't think this worked, did it? It looks like it's in the same order. All right, so I tell you what, this is the first time I tried this. In the chat pod, tell me what you think the top 2 leadership fails are. So I'm gonna get rid of this and we're gonna like pivot because that's what you do. So in the chat pod, which of these items, and hopefully you can still see my screen, right? Can you guys see the screen okay? No? Okay. Let me share that again. Okay, here you go. So these are the top 5 things. What do you think are the top 2? Okay, so expectations and empathy. I'm going to just write these down. Empathy, expectations. Thank you, Stephanie. Liberation, another expectation. So I'll add 2 to that. Resilience, another expectations. Expectation, empathy. Awesome. Great. Good. Thank you for that. So yeah, so this is what the research says. So I looked at Harvard, Burson, which I really like if you're kind of an HR person. They have a lot of great HR research. Deloitte, used to work with them, McKinsey and some others. And this is kind of in alignment with what you said. Like empathy seems like that's a top one that you indicated. Expectations, people that are not setting clear goals or not following through. Liberation, okay, so this is pretty much an alignment. I don't know if I saw decision making, but yeah. So okay, so it looks like this is pretty much the top 3. Let me just invite anyone to open your microphone if there's anything that you want to say or comment based on what you think the top leadership fails are that you're seeing. So if anyone wants to kind of open their mic or raise your hand, this is kind of an opportunity that we can do a little talking instead of chatting if you want.
Hey, Michael.
Hey, Ellen, how are you?
Great. I'm kind of surprised by missing sort of, culture and strategy, although maybe that's
Mm-hmm.
something bigger. Um,
Yeah.
and the reason I bring it up is, me, I love frameworks. And for anyone out there who hasn't heard of the Cynefin framework, which is a
Mm-hmm.
Welsh word, I'll type it in. It kind of blew my mind, and I think everybody at C-suite level should understand it. And that's because it's a sense-making, decision-making framework. And with COVID, we started realizing there's different ways to respond depending on the context. And it has
Mm-hmm.
to do with our ability as leaders to understand the cause and effect connection,
Mm-hmm.
and with COVID, it was something completely unexpected. I don't think there had been a lot of um, you know, people didn't know what to do. It was very chaotic. And so if you look at the Cynefin framework, it tells you a different kind of sequence of actions to take. And
Mm-hmm.
so it's super strategic. And so I just throw that out as the thought.
What's the takeaway to that framework? Is it the culture and the strategy, or
No,
is
the
there more?
takeaway is that for any leader, when you have a burning platform or a big challenge or opportunity, you first need to know what domain you're in.
Okay.
Am I in the domain? And it's sort of like I can explain it kind of like through an analogy. If you are playing a game of tic-tac-toe, that's a very simplistic domain. You're going to always win if you're the first one, if you follow all the rules.
Hmm.
And so there's very much a direct correlation between cause and effect, right? So the domain you're in dictates the process and the way you go about doing everything on here, if that makes sense. So
Yep.
it's a superset framework.
Yeah, and there's a lot underneath this. There's like different behaviors, and these are just kind of headlines. So, kind of the thought is like, as a result of doing a lot of these behaviors, you're going to actually develop a culture of accountability, of open feedback, of demonstrating empathy. So, kind of the culture piece, it kind of runs through that. But you do raise a good point about the strategy. And for me, I think it's like making sure that for number two, the expectations, making sure that you have a clear strategy, clear corporate goals, and then those goals can be cascaded to the C-suite, to the directors, to the managers, to the frontline employees of having some expectations. But thank you for that, and just like please give me your feedback, and if we don't get to yours, just dump it in the chat pod, and we'll review that later. But yeah, I want to like that's the whole point of this. I want you to kind of give some feedback on like, is there anything missing? Is there anything that like could be kind of woven together a little bit differently? So I saw Frederick's hand,
Yeah.
and then I saw Sarah. So Frederick, do you have a point that you'd like to make?
Yeah, I think the item number 8, resilience,
Hmm.
as an executive, you have to be able to stay the course. And one of the biggest challenge that I find, it's so easy to start pivoting a little bit and go, well, yeah, we'll adjust this expectation, or we'll adjust this. And 2 degrees of separation in direction from New York is the difference between Anchorage, Alaska, and Los Angeles. And so early on, you have to be really resilient and remain optimistic in terms of this is a direction we're staying in, and I'm confident in the outcome. This is going to get us to Los Angeles, going to get us to Anchorage. This is where we want to go. And so
Yeah.
I think it does well in terms like culture and strategy and direction,
Hmm.
but being clear as to what you're aiming at, and then staying resilient in defending that direction in some ways
Yeah.
would be one of the things that, as executive, we have to be super disciplined in
Right.
that instance.
Yeah. No, I like that. It's like you have the goals, but they need you to be resilient. You need to like don't give up. It's not like the flavor of the month, but you need some staying power, know when to commit to it, but
Right.
then know when you need to pivot. And when you pivot, can you let go so that you can pick up some other things? So
Right. But when you
yeah,
pivot, make
important.
sure you identify you did pivot and that it's a change. So all of a sudden they actually trust that the direction is still the direction.
Yep.
And so you don't do it too often. Otherwise, you're aiming nowhere and you're going to get there.
Yep. And that's like a big thing that we see. A lot of people pivot and they assume everyone knows that they're pivoting, but they haven't really communicated that they're changing direction or pivot. So
Which ties back to expectations, right?
yeah, definitely.
Set, like, I mean, the deadly sin in relationships beyond just leadership is unspoken expectation. If people don't know what you expect,
Hmm.
then don't be surprised if they're disappointed that their expectations are not met because you just didn't know.
Yeah, I love it. Like one of my favorite leaders I used to work with said, you need to inspect what you expect. So just telling people what you expect, some people assume they're going to get it, but it's kind of that follow through and holding people accountable, which is really important. So
Yeah, I think before you inspect, you have to tell
yeah. True.
them.
Good. Thank you so much. Sarah, go ahead and unmute and love to hear what your thoughts are.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So I would like to add vulnerability to this list, or leading with vulnerability. And the
Okay.
reason I'm saying that is because a lot of these items that are listed here can be enabled and empower, the rest of the organization when there's a leadership team with vulnerability. I've seen that work really well. I've also seen the opposite if it's overused or if it's used in, highly inappropriate times. For example, if there's from a resilience standpoint, so when you're looking at number 8, is that the right time to be super emotional and vulnerable at that time? Probably not. But during other times, I think it's a huge trust builder because it empowers individuals in individual contributor positions, in positions that might not have had a lot of exposure to the leadership team, to be safe from the psychological safety component.
Mhm.
And I've seen it impact the bottom line, quite frankly. So I think a lot of times there's a disconnect between believing that there is an actual correlation to the business bottom line and the power of vulnerability in the workplace. And
Yeah.
so that's number one. The second part on this list, which I come out of a very global environment. I run a global agency, and one of the things that I've been thinking about and having a lot of dialogues with talent in the markets that I'm currently supporting and clients is that that list would probably tend to vary depending on the country and the society and the cultural norms. And I know that obviously this is a call in the US, but the reality is that most of us are, in at least in some sort of a global space where we're dealing with maybe a vendor that's overseas or, having outsourced talent that we're managing from a distance, leading from a distance. And I think in those situations, so I'll give a quick example. Before I started my agency, the last company I was at, we had 190 employees in Lahore, Pakistan. And with, Pakistan has about 8% of women that are employed in the workforce.
Mm.
And I purposely hired a female HR leader. And after about a year in, I don't know if I did her a disservice or a favor by putting her in that position, because you can imagine, the resistance that she was facing and the challenges and everything else. So when I was trying to coach her to be more open and vulnerable, she at some point broke down and said, it's not that I don't want to be, it's that it's completely unacceptable, from a cultural standpoint to even lean into that direction, let alone voice an opinion. Now, that's a drastic example. I think there's a lot, kind of in between that. But you do need to be able to tailor your approach and the impact on each of these items on the list. If that was, taken in various different societies, I would be really curious to see what that would look like.
Yeah, that's interesting. And the cultural standpoint, the cultural differences, like that's really important. And we didn't really consider that as much as we should. So that's like excellent feedback. And the vulnerability, I think that's really important as well. That's kind of in the liberation, like creating an environment
Right.
where you can be open. So but I hear what you're saying. That's really important. So thank you.
Yeah, and so and I think another thing too, and then I'll end because I don't want to dominate this call, but one of so it's expected somewhat out of the HR space, right? So my background is all in HR leadership, and so there it's not this, wow, okay, you have an HR leader that's being vulnerable and open and is showing empathy, that hopefully is a given if you're in that space, and if you're
Yeah.
not, then please don't be in that space because you're doing the company the service. But the most impactful transformations that I have seen came out of a CTO and a CFO.
Mm,
And the reason being is because, and that this was in a cutthroat private equity environment, and the reason being that that was very unexpected because people were expecting a certain level of, iciness and just really, hardcore environments, which they were. But these two individuals were able to turn that around and really gain better traction, and we ended up having a super high retention rate because people felt
yeah.
safe in an environment that is not exactly seen to be safe, that was led by somebody that had spent 40 years at Wall Street and
Right.
not somebody who thought that emotions were ever appropriate in the workplace. So
Yeah.
yeah, so coming out of unexpected sort of positions, I think that's an important add-on. But thank you for the feedback, and that's my
Yeah, no, thank you for your feedback. I appreciate it.
point.
DeWitt, I think you had a point.
Yes. First of all, Michael, I love the model and the framework, and like the comments, particularly around culture and probably gender and some other aspects of this that could be impacted by this list. I think one place of clarity, or for me could be greater clarity, is really between liberation and yielding. I kind of see building as the subset or the table stakes to set up someone for liberation. Like, to me, if you're never empowering people or delegating, then they're never going to feel like they are able to be creative and take risk and that sort of thing. So they feel like they could be differentiated a little bit better in terms of what is the real difference that you're looking for here in leaders, because I think they're very closely tied to each other.
Yeah, good. Thank you. Yeah, and some of it, like, they're not mutually exclusive. There's a little overlap, but I get it. Yeah, it could be maybe packaged a little bit differently or explained a little bit differently in more detail in the book. So great. Good feedback. And, I invite everyone, if you have anything else that you're like, oh yeah, I wanted to say this, just pop it in the chat pod. And I promise you it will not go on deaf ears. So taking those behaviors, I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but I'm like, is there like a way that we can even drill them down differently and put them in buckets? And it seems like they fall in, and, I hear the liberation, the culture, the gender, the vulnerability. That's an opportunity to kind of massage this back into the model. But really, there's these three categorical failures. So there are connection-oriented failures where you don't have empathy, you are not vulnerable. You don't create this culture of freedom and liberation. Then so this is more of like the person. This is more of like the company or the organization. So execution oriented, you're not making the right decision making, you're not making the right decisions, you're not adapting, yielding. And these are predictors of performance and agility, as the connection oriented failures are predictions of engagement and retention. And then for the growth oriented failures, you just like, I have seen leaders say, I don't want anyone to be off the job for more than an hour. And we're going to have training for an hour, and that's all they get. And like, any of you that are trainers, like, sometimes it takes an hour just to kind of get people like bought in before you move it, before you get them to like understand and take ownership to kind of move their behavior change forward. But so growth is really a part of this. Resilience, as we talked about before, and negotiation. And these are predictors of long-term success. So that's kind of the framework and some of these categorical failures. So, but yeah, thank you for that. And there's still plenty of time to kind of massage this. But this model, it actually, like, as we started like looking at it, and as I get some additional feedback, not only from today, but going forward, it really hinges to a lot of other things. Like, we have the book, but then we have a 360 assessment. You can consult and give people feedback on what that model is. And then we have the training, keynotes, workshops, leadership simulations, case studies, exercises, and executive coaching. So the goal is to kind of get this right. So if you read the book today, you're like, hey, that could really help us with, let's create a culture of vulnerability and liberation. How do we do that? Well, we can assess it, we can consult, we can have some leadership experiences, do executive coaching. There's probably a million other things that we could do. But that's kind of the power of this framework, that it can actually touch and grow to something else. And the thought was, we want to try to keep it very short and succinct, because we've seen tons of competency models out there that are so robust. It's like, holy heck, like, how do I start? But we wanted to make it clear. So I think maybe as we like build out the definitions, we might be able to map to some of these other concerns that you have. So let me pivot. We have, so it's 1:22 Eastern time. We have until 1:40 if that still works for you. But I want to do a case study and see how this applies. And I don't know about you, but I like airplanes. I like rockets. I think Tesla is like an amazing company. But Elon Musk, let me just, like, without saying anything else, in the chat pod, what are some words that come to mind when you think specifically of his leadership style? What do you think of his leadership style? I'm going to go back to the chat here so I can see. Direct. Yeah. Yeah, super, super direct. I'm going to share an email that he sent out when he took over Twitter, and I'm going to ask you guys for a little bit of analysis with that. Narcissistic, there's that word again. Curt, zero empathy. Let's see. Anything else? My way or the highway, confident and arrogant. Yeah. So there's like the good, and this is the thing. Not everyone's inherently good or inherently bad. Like he's very innovative. He's very strategic. But some of those things, like definitely in this like legendary leadership framework, there's an opportunity for him to maybe pivot his style. So yeah, from what like the media says, he fails to consider alternative perspectives, like what one person said, my way or the highway, less likely to ask for feedback. And I know that he drives his HR team crazy because he makes all these decisions and then doesn't consult with other people like HR. And then HR has to come in and do damage control and cleanup. But so this is a public document. This is from The Verge and it's all over the internet. But this is an email that he sent to his team back in November of 2022. So 2 years ago. And basically he said, going forward, we're creating this new Twitter, which obviously became X. This will mean working long hours, typically 80 to 100 hours a week is what he's quoted on asking people. And only exceptional performance will be a passing grade. So basically he asked people to, are you in this? If so, click yes, saying that you agree to these new expectations, you agree to these terms. And if not, we're going to give you 3 months of severance. Whatever decision you make, thank you for your efforts to make Twitter successful. So I guess that's a little bit of empathy there. But I'm just curious, and we can just do this in the chat pod. Like, I just want to kind of test this and see if it works. So here's the email at the top. Here's the individual items in the model. Which of these do you feel that he is known to violate? And particularly, let's look at just this email. So let's say that you were an HR, chief HR officer, and you saw this email being sent to all of your employees, and you wanted to give some like coaching to Elon. What are some things that you might invite him to think about? And again, people need to be open and open to feedback before they actually agree to make any types of change. But I'm asking you to kind of apply this model. And what do you think are maybe one or two of these leadership derailers, if you think of the opposite, that actually are reflected in this email? So I'm going to go to the chat pod. Sarah, liberation, adaptability, and yielding, good. Looks like some other things are coming in. Anything else that comes to mind? So again, his ego is leading. So that kind of, for me, that deals with empathy. Doesn't really take into account, like, do employees have the ability to like commit everything that they have to work? Are they open to working the 80 to 100 hours a week? So that could be some empathy. Let me see if there's anything else in the chat pod. Some other things coming in. Decision making. Yeah, he didn't do his research, didn't partner with other people, lacking empathy. He was providing clear expectations. Yes, thank you for that. I agree. I agree with that. But this is what kind of we came up with. So there's liberation, this hardcore directive. And you guys mentioned this before, it undermines the psychological safety for creativity and innovation. Like, I get it. He wants people committed. He wants people like working hard, working smart, but there might be a better way than to say, click here if you agree, or, you're fired and look for your severance to come in the mail. Empathy, his tone and delivery dismisses the emotional and personal needs of his employees. Expectations, yeah, those were pretty clear demands, but is there an opportunity to maybe engage employees and ask for their input? Was an email the right communication medium to do this? Or could this have been a town hall? Or could managers have had conversations with their teams? Growth, exceptional performance. Right now, this is focused on output, not so much on development. And then resilience. This was considered a do or die approach. So let me just check the chat, see if there's anything. Yeah, he's very results driven. He's very profit driven. I heard he's moving a lot of his offices out of California because of their laws to other places as well. So, I mean, not to get political, but I think there are some things that we can learn from this. And granted, this is an extreme example. Like, he's one of the wealthiest people in the world. And with that, if you don't check it, if you don't pay attention to it, it can cause some derailers. So, all right, I'm going to skip to this, and we have about 12 more minutes. I want to talk about Elizabeth Holmes at Theranos. So this was really cool, and this came out a while back. And those of you who are not familiar, she basically invented this system. It looked like a desktop printer where you could just take a drop of blood and it tells you if you have high cholesterol, if you have any medical concerns. And the challenge was it didn't work. So they would be collecting blood and then they would run it through other labs and other systems. And it created this horrible, horrible culture. Some employees committed suicide because of it. But at the same time, they were like telling Silicon Valley, like, this is the best thing, please invest it. They made millions and millions and millions of dollars. There's a great documentary on that. And when it comes to checking yourself, it's really important that you consider the model that we have and just what like good legendary leadership looks like. But for her, she made a quote, asking yourself whether you're wrong is a really good thing. Okay, so that's good. If you really feel strong conviction that you're doing the right thing, then keep going. So that's the thing. She was so passionate and emotional and wanted this new product to take hold. Actually, Walgreens put it into their stores and they were actually using it. So they were giving everybody these false reports. People were having health concerns. I saw one person had a heart attack because the lab results said everything was fine, but actually there were some things wrong. So it's really important that you like don't keep going, but surround yourself by people that can give you feedback, that can give you input, that can give you direction to really help you hone like what your leadership approach would be. So for her, it was deceptiveness, it was lack of accountability, it was ethical misconduct as well. So any comments on Elizabeth or anything that you, she's delusional? Yeah, she was. And she's in prison now. I think she's serving a 9-year sentence. I actually tried to contact her the other day and I had a hard time. I wasn't able to do it, but I'm like, I wonder if she would talk to me. So anyways, I think it's fascinating how people can be so successful, like in quotes, and inspire people to like work really hard, to give a lot of money, because they're so innovative and well-spoken, but at the core of it, some of their ethics may be misaligned. All right, so I have one more example. I'm going to go through this really quick here. It's Ellen DeGeneres, and I don't know about you. I thought Ellen was pretty good, but I was surprised that she basically, after 19 seasons, her show was canceled, and she branded herself as being like the queen of kindness, but people were starting to say that she was the queen of mean. And you can look at this on YouTube. There's a apology that she did, or some people call it a PSA, public service announcement, where she actually made fun of the whole situation. She actually made the situation worse. And basically, she knew about some things in her organization, let's call it, where people were being toxic. They were harassing employees. They were belittling employees in meetings, and she knew of it, and she didn't take any action. And that's really part of being a leader. Like, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it's awkward, it's like it's our responsibility to actually lean in and try to evoke change by addressing some of these bad things. So some of the things that were known as her key failures from this case study in the book is a violation, a liberation fail, where she stifled dialogue by creating this fear-based environment. Empathy, she disconnected from team emotions and failed to foster inclusion. Yielding, delegation without oversight, not paying attention to some other leaders that were not doing some great things. Expectations and resilience. So again, really important pieces that can be learned from examining some of these lousy leaders. So what do you do? And then I'm going to ask you for a little bit more feedback on the book, and then we'll wrap up in about 7 minutes. So how do you interact with a lousy leader? This was some of the feedback that I had when I was sharing parts of the manuscript. It's like, okay, this is all great, but like, what do you do if you're working with an Elon or you're working with an Elizabeth or someone that just doesn't quite get it the way that you see it? You want to educate that leader on how they may be harming others and themselves. Sometimes it's good to get outside advice, like an executive coach or someone, if they would be willing to have those conversations, provide feedback, set some boundaries, get some other people that would have these conversations, document everything, and try to model this legendary leadership. So I want to go back to the structure of the book. And I know there's only so much that you can do in an hour and 10 minutes, but based on this, if you were to like pick up a copy of this book, and this was kind of the organization and the structure of the book, case studies, application, an explanation of the model, unpacking it a lot more deeply than just kind of the definitions that we looked at today, talking about the case studies and the application, giving people opportunity at the end of the book, like, okay, now that you've read this, now that you've experienced it, now that you've maybe thought about it, hopefully you're thinking things a little bit differently. What are some reflections that you have, and what can you do going forward for yourself, for the leaders that you serve, for people in your organization? But does anyone have any comments or anything that you think is maybe missing or should be kind of added to the structure of the book? You can raise your hand if you want, or dump it into the chat pod.
Michael, I have
Yeah.
a comment.
Yeah.
You have examples of entrepreneurs and leaders. For me, Elizabeth was an entrepreneur. She wasn't a real leader. And probably Elon is another example. And I think that the two roles require a whole different skill set. You can be a terrific leader, but not necessarily a good entrepreneur.
So what do you think is the key difference from an entrepreneur to someone that is considers himself a leader?
Well, the entrepreneurs that are successful, they have a certain drive. They have a certain rhythm. They work with momentum. They don't always consider their teams or the people that will be impacted by certain choices, certain decisions. So it's all about the prize. You know, it's all about the hunt. Whereas leading a team, that's a whole different skill set. And there's a reason why in extreme growth, these entrepreneurs like to go get a GM or someone who takes care of the team because they have no time and no interest for the team.
Yeah. Yeah. And I hear you. Thank you for that feedback. I think that's really helpful. The other thing is like looking at the life cycle of organizations. Like if you look at organizations that are new, that are a startup, like they're very scrappy. It's like everyone work really hard and figure it out. And then over time, they become more mature. They develop more processes. They have more expectations of what leaders are. So I think that might be kind of part of it too. It's not just looking at the definitions and looking at the entrepreneur and the leader, but also looking at the type of organization. Like if you're working at a small nonprofit, it's probably going to be very different than if you're working at Unilever or a big global company. But I think that's really important to make the differentiation between the entrepreneurs and the leaders. So thank you for that. Dave, I see your hand. Any comments you'd like to make?
I agree with Roxanne, and it's interesting. I spent a few years working with a founder who I'm still friends with, an exceptional guy. it seems like, and I've worked with several sort of founders, entrepreneurs, and they typically are like ridiculously talented and intelligent, but big ego. And honestly, I've been in sales leadership now, and Mike, I think you and I met probably in 93, which is crazy. Yeah. So it's been a good 30 years. And I learned a lot from my mistakes, but the biggest quality that I think is the most important being an effective leader, and it's the thing that a lot of people struggle with, is just humility.
Yeah.
It's if you're a leader, part of your role is to surround yourself with excellent people and empower them to do their role. This person runs finance, this person runs operations, this person runs sales. So I think that a lot of times somebody in the chat had said, is the best founder typically a good leader? I haven't seen one yet. Now I just started with a new company, a very small company, and I'm literally a week and a half into this. And I have a feeling that this founder is actually an exceptional CEO. And the reason, yes, based on what I just said, is he's very humble. He's very humble. He's like, hey, challenge us. You tell me, give me coaching, give me feedback. And I'm like, wait, what? And so I've joined this company, and I very much feel like a partner instead of, the CEO hanging over my shoulder, kind of telling me what to do. So I'm already half in, and I feel empowered. And I'm like really gung-ho and motivated to do an excellent job because I'm respected and I'm appreciated. All those sort of people skills that all of us here know and realize. So I don't know. And I think that I like the flow that you have here of your book. And I think if you can, have somebody be able to reflect, and maybe I think Elon and this other lady might be tough examples because Elon, I think he's brilliant. Do I think he's a good leader? Probably not.
Yeah.
Just that email alone was a good example of like 5 things not to do. But again, I just, pride cometh before a fall. And I think that if you can, and I would just leave it with humility is such an important trait, and it seems so hard to find, especially these days.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. So humility is super important. And so I'm hearing like humility is really important. We talked about kind of culture, strategy, the differences between entrepreneurship and leadership, resiliency. I think we captured a lot of this, and we're recording this. I'll go back and do it. But yeah, so thank you guys for your feedback and input, and like the invitation to continue the dialogue is always open. One thing I just wanted to give, and I'm not going to follow up. It's like, if you want it, that's great. But if you're interested in like the 360 assessment that we have, normally it's $750, and we're doing kind of a deal for 3 people, and you can do this for up to 10 people in your organizations. But it's a 360. It's a 30-minute success call to like set up the 360 and let people know how to select raters and pull it all together. And then it's a one-on-one executive coaching. It's normally about $1,500. It's $737 until the end of the year if you're interested. So I told you I would give you 2 copies if you stuck around to the end. I'm going to do a screenshot of everyone that's here. So smile pretty. 1, 2, 3. Okay. And then as you exit, there's a brief evaluation, just to kind of like, not an evaluation, but a couple questions on like, do you think anything's missing? Any comments that you have? And then at midnight tonight, we'll select 2 leaders. We'll send a follow-up email tomorrow, kind of a quick summary of like what we have. I really, really thank you guys for your time and attention and giving me the gift of your feedback to help us kind of finalize the book and shape it together. Wish you all an amazing holiday season, and go be amazing, legendary leaders. And thank you again. If you have anything else or you want to have a quick call, always reach out. I'm happy to have a conversation. I'll stick around if anyone has any questions, but thank you guys so much. I appreciate your time and attention and participation today. See you.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.